I'm the Ayuma fanboy, and as you might be able to tell, I'm a huge fan of My Hero Academia. And as a massive fan, I've imagined what it would be like to have my own quirk. I've come up with many possible quirk ideas, and so I thought it'd be great to make a video about it. And just to make it more interesting, I've designed characters that match those quirks and ranked them from 100th to 1st. These are quirks that I've thought of by myself, but obviously they might have already been invented by other people. But whatever. I'll go into detail about how the quirks work, their strengths and weaknesses, and any other relevant character information. And just before I start, my siblings did draw out some of the designs for me, but the majority were made using an anime character designer website, which links for are in the description. So, without further ado,
let us release the quirks.
Okay, so just know, the first few quirks you see are kind of like the gag quirks I came up with, but I promise it gets better from there, so make sure you watch the whole video. I'll be taking you through them quite quickly, but feel free to pause and read the quirk description in your own time. So, in 100th place, we have Spot Pop. This boy's quirk gives him extremely greasy skin, which causes hundreds of spots to go around his body. He can then pop these spots to release a strong acid which is corrosive to the skin. It's 100th not only because it's an incredibly stupid and disgusting idea, but because I guess it would be quite easy to dodge and counter against. What an unfortunate quirk to be born with. 99. Multitask. Multitask is exactly what it says it is. It allows a user to do 2 or more tasks at one time with extreme ease. This has several practical uses. For example, studying and playing at the same time, or maybe fighting and using a mobile at the same time to call for help. However, as much as this is a quirk which lots of us would die to have, there is nothing really extremely special about it.
98th is Moneymaker. This guy can make money by combining his golden hair with his saliva, which is kind of gross. However, money is very good in many situations. It can buy you protection, as well as pretty much anything. However, the one disadvantage is that you'd probably be targeted. Imagine if he was born into poverty, how great that would be.
97. Skin to skin. As this diagram represents, the user hairs has special endings on it which can form an extremely strong bond with hairs on other people. When this happens, it is impossible to separate unless the user wants to or the other person rips off their skin. Ouch. This will give her a unique battling style, especially if she can find a way to gain an advantage with it. However, if her opponent is strong, for example someone like Bakugo, they will just release their explosion and she'll be forced to detach. And then what? In 96th, we have Hammer Arm. Yeah, this is a pretty basic idea, but I thought it'd be quite funny if a girl was walking around with hammers as her arms. These hammers are of course special, as they can reduce shock absorption for the user, allowing her to swing her arms without constraint. Probably one of my most boring ideas, so I'll move on to the next now. 95 is Skin Rejection. This quirk isn't that powerful, but I personally think it would be quite a cool character concept. Basically, her skin negatively repels other skin, which means nobody can come within 5 centimeters of her. An unusual quirk and one nobody would like to have, cause you'd never be able to get into a solid relationship. Also, another negative is that this barrier doesn't mean she can't actually be hit by attacks, as long as the attack isn't someone's fist. The one benefit, however, is that she can't be kidnapped. No rescue arcs for her. 94th is called Intense Smell. This quirk allows our cat here to pass on her sense of smell to others. As humans are not normally adapted to heightened senses of smell, this can be extremely uncomfortable for them and even painful, giving her a temporary edge in a fight. She doesn't really look like the fighting type though. At 93, I have Obesify. This quirk user is a cheerleader who can literally make another person a beast just by touching them. This is a great gag quirk, but also would be pretty powerful if you can think about it. This helps in her cheerleading competitions as she can weaken her rivals, but it would be also great in combat as it would be very hard to move around when you're so heavy. It lasts for 2 minutes at a time, and during this time, she's sure to have the upper edge in her fight.
92 is Motorcycle. This quirk allows our chav here to turn into a motorcycle on demand, kind of like a transformer. This is good for attacking, but also for getting away.
Okay, we're moving on to some better quirks now. This quirk is Smoke. He has an ability that allows him to amplify the amount of smoke he releases from his cigarettes. This creates a cloud of smoke around him, which is about 5 meters each way. When an enemy comes into this territory, it becomes extremely hard for them to breathe, and they go into a coughing fit. This hinders their attack and gives them a large opening. This idea does somewhat remind me of the overhaul henchman that Lemillion faced off with. You know, the one that made him feel drunk? It's kind of like that, but worse.
90th place is Sink. This user can produce quicksand from his palms, which then spreads over a large area, and this can sink anything it touches deep into the earth. Of course, this would be extremely strong and effective against weaker enemies, but a stronger enemy would probably be able to resist or dodge it, and then he's pretty much screwed.
89th goes to the health bar quirk.
This is quite a cool concept, because she has the power to see people's energy levels as numbers above their heads, kind of like a health bar. This allows her to gauge how much strength an enemy has left, which she can then inform the one fighting them about. However, knowing most main characters in anime, it probably wouldn't work for them. Our boy Deku would have -10 but still be going strong. 88th is Sieve. This quirk is entirely defensive in nature. They can produce a large sieve that only lets very small matter through it, no matter how strong an attack is. This means a 100% Texas Smash cannot pass it, whilst a tiny drop of water could. This gives her a good defense and would be very useful for shielding her allies from large-scale attacks. 87. Shelly. Both the name of the quirk and of the character, this power allows the user to fire high-pressure water out of the shells on her arms. As these shells are connected to the ocean, their supply is limitless.
These shells are also a good defense, as they are very hard.
86. Solar power. As a lover of our planet, solar power is one of the leading technologies. However, this man doesn't use solar power to power buildings. He uses it for himself to gain power. He has several solar panels across both arms, which absorb light from the sun and convert it to physical energy. As cool an idea as this is, all it does is increase the energy levels, and it would only work when the sun is out, which is practically never where I'm from.
85 is head sensor. I got this idea from a Wii sensor, and this sensor allows the owner to detect any person's exact whereabouts within a mile radius. This would be a very useful sidekick quirk, and as her being one of the wild pussycats, this quirk would have been very useful in that arc. 84 is net. The user can shoot out a net to capture their opponents. What's different about this net though, is that it's extremely tough due to its molecular structure, and so it's practically impossible to break free from once you're caught in it. So no matter how powerful you are, if you get caught, you're caught. I guess Shigaraki could decay it, and All For One would probably have some sort of trick, but anyone else can't really do anything about it. Maybe it should be higher up this list.
83rd. Skydive. Skydive is a special type of teleportation. However, it only works in a vertical plane. This hero can teleport up to 50 meters directly upwards on demand, and he always carries parachutes with him so that he can then glide away instead of falling to his death. He can also carry objects and people with him when he does this. This would be really useful if you were in an underground base or in any situation you'd like to escape,
Because you could just transport upwards. Rank 82 is called No Help. This is a magical quirk, which can create a barrier with a 30-meter diameter that prevents any person from leaving or entering the barrier until all but one inside the barrier are knocked out or dead, even if the user of this quirk is defeated. This prevents a protagonist, say Midoriya, from getting any support during a 1v1 fight with a villain, giving him the opportunity for a power-up. Yay! 81 is zombies. This grade school here can release a zombie from his body that he can then move with his gaming controller. This zombie has great speed, power, and even weapons attached. The user never shows any emotion because he is locked up playing in this game. This is what the new generation will all be like soon. 80th is Intimidate. Although young, this guy's quirk allows him to start a fight on the upper hand by feeding fear into his opponent's heart. His Intimidate on a weak enemy will literally leave them paralysed, but on a strong enemy, can still reduce their attack power. It's similar to high spiritual pressures in Bleach. 79th is Transform. This quirk is quite similar to Toga's, and also transformation jutsu. But it's easier to pull off because the user doesn't need to have seen the person he would transform into before. He can change his appearance to the person his opponent fears most, or loves the most. They will be frightened to see the person they fear, and unsure about attacking their baby sister. Once you get past the illusion, however, he can't match the power of those he transforms to, so he's pretty useless. 78 is Grudge. La Brava Evil Version. Grudge allows the user to power up depending on how much they dislike their opponent. And this is pretty useful considering the fact that this person doesn't really like anyone, or anything, and is very easily irritated. 77 looks towards opposite direction. This hero can flip the direction of slow-moving solids, liquids, or gases. For example, he could divert a slow-moving car, a slow-moving stream, or a poisonous gas. It doesn't work for high-speed objects, as this would be way too overpowered.
In 76th is Stasis. Stasis allows this young chap to stop the flow of water and electricity. This could be used to stop a boat from sinking or falling down a waterfall, or to jam communication signals. By the way, if you wanted to know what this annoying voice you're hearing right now looks like, this is it.
Last of the first quarter is Paint. An extremely colourful picture for you to look at here. This girl can dip a paintbrush into her hair and colour it. She can then use this to paint, or release small attacks related to the colour she's chosen. So if she dips the brush in the red part of her hair, she can create a fire attack. Blue, then it's a water attack, and so on. 7-4 is the quirk Neon. This quirk is quite similar to the French baguette's Ioma's, so I gave the character a similar vibe of fabulousness. He can emit extremely bright lights from any part of his body. These lights only blind and don't do any physical damage. 73rd place is 2D. There are a few quirks in this list which share some sort of transformation features, and this is the most simple one of them all. She can change herself from a 3D to a 2D form at any time as long as a wall or floor is present for her to transform onto. Doing this allows her to move around without being noticed, and also to dodge attacks. The downside is that it's only good for sneaking around an opponent, and she still can be damaged when in 2D form. 72nd is Landmine. This guy has just graduated from the UA support course, and has the power to release worms into the ground that detonate when stood on or hit by a kunai. It's like a different take on Bakugo's explosions. Hero 2, I am a hero too. Oh, I'm recording. Well, that's embarrassing. Anyway, 71st is Magnify. The user has a magnifying glass-like structure in the middle of his hand that can condense sunlight and moonlight to create fire and water attacks, respectively. Cool, but I feel like I got this idea from another anime. I just can't remember which. Next is this guy, whose quirk is as sly as his personality. His quirk, Deceive, means he is able to change his appearance so that he looks injured when he is not, and look in perfect health when he is severely injured. This can be used to trick enemies into thinking he has no strength left, so he can pounce, or to confuse an opponent as to why they are not damaging him. Cool, eh? Now we have Sharpen. As you can see, this boy has a massive hole in the centre of his stomach, and anything he puts into this hole will be sharpened. E.g., putting a wooden plank in there can turn it into a wooden sword. Don't put your hand in there, trust me on this one. 68. Knowledge is power. This is a very useful quirk as a sidekick, as she can tell what someone's quirk is just by looking at them. For someone you know nothing about, for example, for people like Shinso, who will have caught you with their quirk before you even have a chance, having her is a massive help. But just of note, she doesn't get any details about how the opponent uses their quirk, just a basic description. 67th is Allergy. There is a very painful backstory to this one, as her quirk means that anyone who touches her will have an allergic reaction, i.e. their hand will go extremely swollen, hot and tender. More seriously, if she breathes very closely to you, she can cause an allergic reaction in your airways, making it very difficult to breathe. She's too afraid to make contact with others, and stays indoors all day. However, she would actually make great use in fighting villains, as swelling up their arms prevents them from using them properly, and stopping their breathing can knock them unconscious. 66th goes to Dismantle. Dismantle allows the user to break up any object to its starting materials. e.g. a cake into sugar, eggs, flour and butter, or a cell phone into aluminium, cobalt and carbon. This is very useful for her passion, which is creating potions, but as for its relevance in battle, I'll leave it there. There may be some overlap with Shigaraki's decay and Overhaul's breakdown, however, none of them really break things down into their starting materials like this one. 65th place is sound control. Sound control allows our second year high school student here to amplify or quieten the sounds of his own movements. This is extremely useful in sneaking up on enemies, as well as at various points within fights, but also on the flip side for allowing others to know where he is. 64th is the Clear Mind quirk. This elven princess, Rayla lookalike, is able to keep her mind clear of any inner turmoil. This means any quirk that affects parts of the brain, including something like brainwashing, won't work on her. She can also clear the minds of people she touches. I could see her being a filler episode character, where a villain with a mind quirk is after her. Deku tries to save her, but isn't able to do it by himself. She clears his mind for him, so that he can then fight the villain, and win. 63rd is Bubble Transformation. This quirk allows her to turn into a single drop of water on demand, which is great for transporting around places. She can travel extremely fast in water, covering 1 mile a minute. The downside to this quirk is that she can't use it during warm weather and outdoors, as she might evaporate. LOL. 62nd is Text Interference. This was originally a gag quirk, however, it's actually very useful when you think deeper. She can intercept text messages travelling between satellites and Earth, and then freely change these messages at will. This makes her a great villain sidekick, as it stops people from getting help and can also turn people against each other. 61st is Transparency. This is a really cool quirk, but not great for combat. He can make objects more transparent by touching them, allowing him to see through things like walls into enemy hideouts, or a sofa for lost keys. Of course, the enemy will be able to see him looking through the walls, which wouldn't be great, so instead he tries to make small areas to look through. 60th is Nettles. This girl is basically a human nettle. She is covered with them. Touching them will sting about 5 times as much as normal nettles though, so close range combat is not an option. These nettles can also grow to grab an opponent and trap them. But guys, don't be hating on her just because she's a nettle. At 59 we have Remove. Simply, she can permanently erase objects from existence. This quirk is like Ares Rewind, but for objects. This is great if she can get her hands on an important enemy device, as well as all of its other potential daily uses. As a side note, imagine her using this on the Hogyoku from Bleach. You know, the special diamond thing Urahara created? Poor Aizen. At 58 is Lego. This guy was designed by my little brother, and he's actually turned out really well. He carries a sack of small Lego pieces with him, which he can enlarge to form bigger pieces. These Lego pieces are extremely strong, and his arms are especially adapted to fit the pieces together, to create objects either for attack or defense. He can even make a small house within 20 seconds. 57th is called Paresthesia. This medical student has the power to increase or decrease the pain sensation felt in an area that she touches. Increasing pain sensation would be a useful thing to use on an enemy in combat to immobilize them, and decreasing it would be great for medical purposes, which is good considering the career she's chosen. 56 is Wish. Wish is one of the quirks that I had to tone down a lot to make it feasible. Wish works when the user and one other both wish for the same thing. However, it can't affect any other person than themselves, and has to be already possible. For example, she and the other person can wish for the death of that person, because for instance, they're in so much pain but won't die for another few days, and it'd be better to get it over with quickly. Or they could wish for something less sad, such as a faster recovery of minor injuries. There are a lot of other things this quirk could be used for, which I haven't thought about yet. Hopefully you guys can think of more possibilities. 55 goes to a Melt quirk. This one's quite simple. She can melt objects if she touches them for long enough. But that's a boring concept by itself, right? So I decided that it'd be cool if she can also melt herself and turn into lava. She can then use this to escape certain situations, as it would be hard to go near her in this form. 54th place is a quirk quite close to home. As a table tennis lover, I thought, let's make a table tennis quirk. But this quirk isn't an inherent ability to play table tennis well. The quirk here is muscle memory. The muscle memory allows him to be generally talented at all sports, but in particular table tennis, which requires a high level of speed and coordination. With his muscle memory, he can perfectly pull off a number of shots using varying spins, speeds, and power. To turn this into a combat quirk, he has a specially designed ball that has the same weight as a normal ball, but pummels an opponent when it hits them. He has outstanding accuracy and spin, allowing him to even hit enemies around corners and at far distances. 53rd best is Whisper and Shadow. Whisper and Shadow is another sensory deception quirk, and the owner uses it to trick her opponent about her whereabouts. She can make it seem like her shadow and voice are coming from one direction, when in fact she is in the other. The opponent will have to ignore their senses of sight and hearing in order to overcome her. 52 is Written Word. Our cool looking nerd here can summon any object that he sees written down. I've made it so small objects require little energy to summon, whilst big objects need a ton of energy, in order to make sure he can't summon things like jumbo jets or whole buildings. Objectively, this quirk is actually quite similar to Momo's, as they are both bringing forth objects. The advantage of this quirk over Momo's is that he doesn't need to know the chemical properties of the substance to summon it, whilst the disadvantage is that if he doesn't have a piece of paper or a book with him, he can't do jack. Of course though, you'd be pretty stupid not to carry around a list of cool items with you all the time if you had this quirk. 51 is The Answer. Like the quirk above, they are both very overpowered, but lower in the rankings just because both have similarities to quirks that already exist. This girl can think of a yes or no question, and when she touches the person she wants to ask that question to, she can get an instant yes or no answer. The similar quirk in question is that of one of the Overhaul's henchmen, who was freely able to force Toga and Twice to answer Overhaul's questions honestly, without them being able to do anything about it. And with that, we've reached our top 50. Things are starting to get really good now, but I'm sure you're tired of my voice, so I'm going to hand over to my little brother and sister for the next 10. See you at 40.
In 50 is Nature Control. This is quite an OP quirk, and one in which Coda's Voice quirk is fairly similar to. Whilst he can control animals, this woman can control plants. To be fair, I think it's better than Voice because, firstly, plants are pretty much anywhere, and two, there's more to be done with them. She can connect to the trees to get information of where enemies are, and she can control plants to grab her opponent, etc. 49th place is Malleable, a quirk that allows the user to change their body shape in any way, as long as it doesn't split and there is still the same surface area. She can turn her fingers into keys to open a door and curve her stomach to dodge attacks. Pretty useful, I'd say.
48th is Pain. Not to be confused with the 6 Paths of Pain, this student hero can amplify the pain felt from her attacks whilst the damage done stays the same. This results in confusion for the enemy, who can see they haven't been damaged in proportion to the pain that they are feeling. 47th is Static Electricity. This guy is like a more powerful Kaminari. He uses static electricity to create lightning. However, due to the friction of the static electricity, he also generates heat at the same time, causing his lightning to turn red. It's like blue fire being better than red fire.
46 is Antibody. Now this quirk is insane. Antibody means that after the user has been hit by an attack, their body creates an antibody to the specific quirk used. She can then multiply this antibody and she is then effectively immune to that quirk. Of course, this only works against certain quirks. The attacks must be directly related to the user, e.g. Voice, which uses animals, or Creative, which makes weapons, wouldn't really work. Also, quirks like Sugar Rush, which are basically power-ups, won't work. Only things like Todoroki's Ice or Fire Attack, Bakugo's Explosions, and possibly Deku's One for All would allow her to make these antibodies. Off note, after a year or so she can get enough antibodies for them to pass out in her urine. The government then collects these samples and grows them to distribute. Imagine using this on All for One's quirks or Shigaraki. Now that would be funny. 45 goes to Restore. Restore means the user can return any broken object to its original form, kind of like a rewind. Imagine how many times you've smashed plates in the kitchen, or broke a phone or expensive item. Well, she'd be a great sister to have for these situations. You'd never get told off by your parents. Battle-wise, I guess you could restore broken costumes, or weapons, which is pretty helpful as well.
44. Speed up. This gentleman has the talent of being able to speed up natural processes. These include, but are not limited to, bodily processes like aging, digestion, recovery, to processes in nature like growing, blooming, or rotting. Hero-wise, healing is a great quirk, although Recovery Girl wins on this one. All in all, a cool quirk. 43. Swap. Swap allows this girl to swap the quirks of two people around. This is useful if a weak friend of hers was fighting an extremely powerful enemy, as it would completely turn the tide of the battle. Also, she can swap it at an awkward time for the enemy, giving her ally an advantage. Therefore, although this quirk is a sidekick quirk as she would be useless by herself, it's pretty powerful.
42. Oxygen removal. This is a perfect quirk for tight spaces because this quirk allows you to suck oxygen molecules out of the air, suffocating your opponent. Conversely, in open space, it's practically useless. She can do this without others noticing, so it's almost like a silent killer. She, of course, has all the oxygen she needs and is otherwise adapted to an anaerobic environment.
41. Energy transfer. This girl has a huge amount of physical energy inside her and can pass it on to others. Of course, she's going to have one of those tragic backstories where she's abused for this power, and our boy would be the one to save her.
Hello, I'm back. So let's continue our journey and dive into our top 40. 40. Attention loss. She may look like she can't do much, but her quirk gives her a massive advantage in battle. This is because her quirk makes an enemy suddenly lose their concentration for a few seconds at random times. They will just be in a daze and be completely open to attack. She can't choose when this happens, but is extremely quick to react when it does. 39 is walk anywhere. As this title suggests, the owner of this quirk can walk on any surface with ease. That is, apart from normal air. Holding hands with others also allows them to do this at the same time. So crossing rivers, check. Walking up buildings, check. And standing on clouds, check. Chakra control but better. 38. Weakness. Another great sidekick quirk here, as this young lady is able to know the strengths of an opponent with her left eye and their weaknesses with her right. This is in terms of areas like speed, power, experience and stamina. This is extremely useful in terms of determining strategy against an opponent to make sure you take full advantage. Also, it is quite common in anime for a villain not to show their full strength straight off the back. With this quirk, you'll be able to tell if they're going at full power or not, hence eliminating this element of surprise. 37th is time stop. This quirk is quite hard to explain because it's not technically stopping time for everyone, it's just stopping time for himself. It's easier to explain if I put it into an example. So, if he walked into a shop which is being robbed and see what's going on, he can use his quirk to stop time within his mind for 30 seconds, so that he can assess the situation and come up with a plan of action. This 30 seconds to think is as long as 0.1 milliseconds in real time. I hope that makes sense. 36. Bone Breaker. To be honest, this isn't a quirk that breaks bones. I just called it that because it sounds cool. In fact, this lunatic is able to change the shape of bones, which is even better. Let me explain why. By changing the shape of bones in his enemies, he can interrupt other structures that surround those bones, such as nerves or major arteries. And he can do this more easily than if he just broke the bones. And by making sure they grow into these structures, he can ensure pain and damage to his opponent. Pretty gruesome indeed. 35 is rubber. Basically, this guy is a rubber, and can rub away any material by sliding any part of his skin against it. The only drawback is that he loses his hair when he does this, which leads to his low self-esteem. Ultimately, this is a great quirk. However, it's probably outdone by decay and overhaul in most situations. 34 is steam.
You have to remember that steam can reach boiling point, and so being able to breathe it like fire, as well as squirt it out your hands, makes it a pretty powerful weapon. It's also good for moving around without being seen. Nifty. 33. Absorb. This guy is basically an evil grass-type Pokemon. He can absorb power from others and give it to himself. His opponent will get progressively weaker, and he will get progressively stronger. It's best if you can take him out with one shot, because a long fight will definitely favour him. 32. Impurity. Impurity allows the user to condense impurities in the air into a solid ball. This is not only good for environmental reasons, but the compound she makes is also a strong defensive and offensive weapon, and she can change the shape of it at will. For example, she can make walls or a platform for her to fly on. So an inner city fight where there's lots of pollution in the air would be perfect, but in the countryside, she'd be much weaker. 31 is never tires. This woman can't ever feel tired. Not ever. She can take damage and feel pain, but she'll never be short of breath or feel like she has no energy left. Basically, this means she has an increased durability in battle and will pretty much fight until her body drops. I got this idea from dogs, who will literally run for hours and they neglect their own body limits, eventually collapsing. I got tired from just reading that paragraph. 30. Get stronger. This originally was a quirk whereby the user starts off very weak, and every attack they take, they get stronger. But to make it even more interesting, I decided that their appearance would change at the same time too, as you can see by the diagram. So they start off as some little kid, who then develops into an ultra-powerful man with insane speed and power. To beat this quirk, I suppose you'd have to try and knock them out in the first shot, which for a lot of people would be quite easy. However, when he gets to his strongest form, he's pretty much invincible. 29. Insect. This boy can turn into any insect that bites him. He will turn to that insect for about 10 minutes before he starts to turn back to a human again. However, whilst turning into an insect is instant, turning back to human happens much slower. During his transformation back to human form, he becomes half insect and half human, hence acquiring powers of both, and he can maintain this in-between form for about 10 minutes. To make sure he can use his quirk when needed, he always carries around a box of different insects, and will flick them to get them to bite him. All in all, this quirk is pretty awesome, as it's good for escape, infiltration, and even battle if you can turn into something like a big spider, mosquito, or fire ant. 28. Choice. This little girl basically has the power to choose what quirk she'd like to have. At the age of 10, she'll be able to pick any quirk she has seen in person and obtain it. This can't be something not invented, as I said it has to be one she's seen. However, the possibilities here are still broad. I made her a villain's daughter because obviously she'd make a good asset, maybe even as good as Eri, if not better. She could choose one for all, decay, or rewind, or even something better if it exists. I think anyone apart from All for One would want this quirk, although it would be so hard to pick. There are too many cool quirks. 27 is storage. This next quirk is extremely useful, apart from its use in battle. It allows the user to store experiences from her senses within her earrings, which she can then replay to others at a later time. For example, she could store a conversation, what an attacker looked like, or even what they smelt like, and then present these to the police. She'd have to be able to escape the situation with the villain, but if she can do that and make it to the police, then you're sure to arrest the right person, and you have all the evidence you need to convict them. 26. Tar. This guy can release tar from his hands to use to either attack or defend against an enemy. As tar is very sticky, it is practically impossible to remove once it's touched you, especially when it hardens. Tar doesn't dissolve in water, so we can use it to get across rivers. It's fire resistant, so it would be great against fire quirks, and you can also change its properties to make it into a massaging gel that heals tired muscles, like you get in spas. However, when he overuses this quirk, the tar starts to leak from different areas, including his eyes, mouth and ears, which he finds quite disgusting as he doesn't really like the tar. He's currently in his second year, but is likely to be one of the big three when he moves into his final year. 25. Variation. Our smug kid here is able to freely change between a solid, liquid and gaseous state.
There are a few quirks in this list that I've talked about changing state into liquid and solids, and this quirk is the best of them. Then, there is the additional transformation to gas, which makes him even more overpowered by allowing him to disappear from his enemy's viewpoint almost completely and form surprise attacks. 24. Tantalum. When I was 14, I had to do a piece of work in chemistry about an element from the periodic table. Being different, I chose tantalum, which I guess not one of you will heard of, unless you're a nerd. I learned that tantalum is practically resistant to fire, electricity, and strong acids, as well as being extremely strong and durable. Hence, I thought it'd be pretty cool if there was a quirk that used it. This guy's cells make tantalum that he can produce from his hands and change the shape of to fight with, as well as giving his body some of its properties. The main disadvantage to this quirk is that... nothing? 23. Damage delay. This quirk is extraordinary in several ways. He has the power to delay damage felt by an attack for up to 5 minutes. For example, if he were to punch someone, he could delay the damage they felt from that punch for a few minutes. Why would this be useful, you say? Here's why. 1. It's hella confusing for the opponent. And 2. If he then releases the damage at a crucial point, like when they're about to stab one of his friends, finish him off, or escape, they'll be stopped from doing so. Also, he can combine the damage on many of his attacks to make one strong attack, which would hopefully knock them out. In the same way he can delay his own attacks, I haven't yet decided about him delaying other people's attacks. Imagine him combining damage from several quirks at once. Nonetheless, this is only half of the possibilities with this quirk. If he delays damage to himself, it'll be confusing to his opponent, as they know they are hitting him, but aren't doing any damage. He can appear all tough, and it'll make them fear him. Also, if someone else has been hit by an attack, for example being stabbed, and he knows this will be deadly, he can delay the damage of the stabbing and hopefully get them to medical attention within those 5 minutes, so that when they feel the damage, they can be treated immediately. Easily one of the best quirks I've thought of, and the fact it's not higher means there are some really great ones to come. 22 goes to no effect. A very original quirk here, I must say. Basically, if the user can touch an object for at least a second, then that object can no longer do damage to them in the future in any way. For example, he could touch a rock for a second, and then throw that rock up in the air, and let it fall on his head because it wouldn't hurt him. He could touch a bomb and then detonate it, and he wouldn't explode. He could touch someone's sword, and it wouldn't be able to stab him. Although, with this last example with the sword, if he hadn't touched the sword previous to it stabbing him, then for 1 second that sword would damage him as it pierced through him. So if he was stabbed in the stomach area, it would rupture the organs there, but a second later, it would not be able to cause any further damage. Of course, this is one weakness of the quirk, as well as if an enemy carries multiple swords or uses a quirk that isn't defined through an object. 21st is thought withdrawal/insertion. Now, thought withdrawal insertions are phenomena that are experienced in schizophrenia, as you feel like your thoughts are being taken out of your head, or that thoughts that aren't your own are being put into your head. This can be extremely distressing, and so the quirk user here can definitely use this in many ways. It can make an enemy forget about a tactic or what they're going to do next, or make them do something else entirely. Quite a horrible quirk in its own way, and as a leaving point, imagine sitting next to this guy in an exam. 20th place is material change. I don't know why, but I really love this character design, as well as this quirk. It helps somewhat in combat, but it's more for other purposes. This guy can change the surface of any wall, floor, or object from one to another. For example, if a wall is concrete and he is about to smash into it, he can change the surface of it to cotton instantly to prevent damage to himself. He could also strengthen a sword by changing it from a metal surface to a gold one, or give a stick a metal surface to allow it to conduct electricity. The possibilities are endless. He carries a scroll on his back which has a small sample of all the materials he can use, and this helps him use the quirk as well. I've put there his dream is to find a diamond or crystal so he can add this to his collection, as these would be pretty sick to use. 19th is limb control. Limb control allows the user to control a limb on their opponent when they've touched it. They can only control one limb at a time, but just imagine how powerful this could be. If you had your own arm constantly punching you,
or holding the other arm down, or even having a knife in that arm, you're going to find it hard to fight, let alone stay alive. If she controls one of your legs, you're not going to be able to run. Of course, knocking her out will stop the quirk, but you're more than likely going to lose the fight before you can do that, as I'm not sure how you can counter it. And something like cutting off your arm or your leg is way too hardcore. 18. Centre of gravity. This next one might not seem like the most powerful quirk. However, Mini Grimjow here's quirk is that he can't ever lose his balance. It doesn't matter if he's tripped, pushed, pulled, you will be unable to move him from his spot. However, this doesn't mean that he can't sustain damage. He just won't move. I put this one high up because it would present with a very unique fighting style. He would always be able to counter an opponent's attack, as after they have hit him, he wouldn't plummet backwards, and instead would be able to get an easy shot on an opponent who is still in their attacking pose. 17 is called Weapon Transmission. This hero can produce special transceivers that are connected to his brain. If he places these on objects, he can control the movement of that object at will, and see what it sees. For example, he could put one on a sword. He can then move that sword into an enemy hideout, spy on them, and attack them by moving the sword with his mind. There is no risk to him when he does this, as he will be far away, making it pretty overpowered. 16. Swapping quarters. It's named this because by touching two different limbs on an opponent at the same time, he can swap around the signals going from the brain to these limbs. In simple terms, if he touched his opponent's right arm and left leg, when the opponent tries to move their right arm, they will instead move their left leg, and vice versa. At the time of creating this quirk, I didn't realise it, but there is a very similar power in Naruto that Tsunade uses. Unlucky for her though, the opponent she used it on was Kabuto, who's a god, and so was able to counter it. However, I don't think everyone is as strong as he is, so you should still be able to win a lot of fights. 15. Tunnel vision. Imagine a quarter, or a half of your visual field going. It would be awkward, right? Well, this quirk allows the user to alter their opponent's visual fields after having at least 10 seconds of eye contact with them. This gives her a massive advantage in close-range fights, as the opponent will not be able to see where she is half the time. A strong opponent would realise this, and try to keep a distance so that they can still see as much as her as possible. Also, they would fire off large-scale attacks in all directions, to make sure they can hit her. Either way, it's lucky that she's on the good side. 14. Pressure. This guy can alter pressures within liquids, as well as some gases. His white eye can also measure pressure. Examples of how he'd use this is by decreasing water pressure when he's under the sea so that he can swim, or collaborating with a water-style user to increase the power of their attacks. However, his main use of this quirk is not related to water. Oh no, it's related to blood. He can increase someone's blood pressure just by touching them. The average adult's blood pressure is 120 systolic. Up to 140, they won't feel anything. Up to 160, they'll start to get lightheaded, a pounding heart, and feel like they might pass out. At 200 though, they'll start to have serious complications like a heart attack or a bursted blood vessel, both of which are fatal. He'd have to be in contact for at least 7 minutes for this to happen though. Kind of frightening, but rest assured, he only uses this on his worst enemies. And he's one of the good guys. 13. Distancing. Okay, I have to admit, this guy might be slightly higher up than he should be because of his awesome character design, but his quirk is still insane too. When he bites someone, he can release a mosquito into their blood. This mosquito has an affinity or attraction towards him, so when it's transferred to another host, it starts to act up, kind of like a child being separated from their mother. Then, the further away he moves from this person, the more stressed the mosquito gets. The mosquito will then release toxins that paralyze the muscles, and the further away he gets, the more toxin is released. If the person doesn't get any treatment, the toxins will eventually affect breathing muscles, causing them to stop breathing and die. 12. Trap. Not a girl-boy trap, although I guess it is slightly hard to tell with this design. Trap is actually a quirk that means the user can make invisible pieces of extremely sharp string out of their hair. They can then shoot this using their bow across a room, for example. Subsequently,
When the enemy walks into the room, they will walk straight into these wires as they can't see them. If they're going fast enough, it will cut straight through them. A silent killer indeed.
11. Death Reversal. Every anime needs a Shinigami, and so here's my heroes. Except, he is actually a human, and those wings you see are just an accessory he uses to fit the part. His ability is that he can reverse the death of a person who has died within the last 24 hours and allow them to live for one more day. During this day, he is comatized in return. Obviously, this quirk would be sought after all over the world, and I can't even put into words how amazing it is. He'd get paid millions by families who'd want to see their relatives once more. He could resurrect a villain to come back and try beat the goodies again. Man, it would be an interesting thing to put in the anime. I'll let you guys listening think more about this one, as I could sit here all day and talk about how awesome it is.
Okay, so whilst entertaining you with another picture of my dog, I'll explain what will happen next, as we have reached our top 10. Trust me guys, you're going to love these, especially the top 3. I've given extra thought into these ones, and thought of some cool backstories to tell you how they might fit into the anime. And now, before I show you number 10, I will be breaking the laws of anime because most of these are girls. 10. Invisify. We have Invisigirl, who can make herself invisible. Yes, that's cool and somewhat useful in combat and other hero activities, but being able to make things invisible is 100 times better. This doesn't work on people, but that doesn't matter. Firstly, this quirk would be great for hiding things. I don't know, if the goodies had stolen one of the villain's important tools, there's no way they could find it using her quirk, unless it had some sort of transceiver attached. Secondly, if she invisified every object in a room, her opponent would literally keep banging into things. And if these objects are sharp, they'd sure be in for a handful. The only thing she needs to do is make sure she remembers where they are, because she might forget. But the best thing you can do with this quirk is surprise attacks. She could make a sword or even a gun invisible. The opponent wouldn't be able to see that she had a weapon, and then bang, she pulls it out on them and they're dead, without them ever seeing a thing. It would be so easy for her to win fights. There you go, a girl with insane powers. However, she is still not the best. 9th is slime. You must be thinking, this girl looks harmless. Well, yes, she is usually very friendly and kind towards others. However, when she gets into a fight, her personality completely changes. Her quirk is slime as mentioned, and basically, she can release a zero friction slime from her skin. This slime covers her whole body, and because there is no friction or resistance on it, any attack will literally just slide off her. A punch, a blast of fire, a tsunami, they'll all just slip past her. And when she wants to attack, she can take off the slime on her hands for an instant to hit you with them. If you think about it, this quirk is very similar to Lemillion's because it's incredibly hard to hit them both if they get their timings right. What's better about Lemillion's is that he can go through walls and stuff. This girl can't, and also it would be possible to beat her by trapping her into a space and suffocating her, whilst Lemillion would be able to get away. However, the advantages of this quirk over Lemillion's is that the bullet that Lemillion took for Eri would have just slipped off her and in a different direction, and also that she can release the slime onto the floor to make the battlefield too slippy for an opponent to fight on. 8th is yet another overpowered female character. She may look like Sakura, but trust me, her powers are more like a Shikamaru. Empathize allows our candy flossed girl to transmit anything she is feeling physically or mentally to others. So if she's in excruciating pain, her opponent would also feel that. If she feels sad, then her opponent will. Consequently, her opponent will always be on equal terms, even if they've dominated a fight. On the flip side, she can make her friends feel happy when she is, which is real nice and sweet. 8th is yet another overpowered female character. She may look like Sakura, but trust me, her powers are more like a Shikamaru. Empathize allows our improved Sakura to transmit anything she's feeling physically or mentally to others. So if she's in excruciating pain, her opponent will also feel that. If she feels sad, then her opponent will. Consequently, her opponent will always be on equal terms, even if they've dominated the fight. On the flip side,
she can make her friends feel happy when she is, which is real nice and sweet. 7th Ghost to Sleep Trapper. If the user is able to curse someone by making them drink a special drink containing her blood, I know, gross, then she is able to enter their dreams on that night and do a variety of things. The first is that she is able to physically fight and damage an opponent in their dream, i.e., when they wake up, any damage took in that dream, they will now have in real life, and they might not even wake up if she managed to finish them off. Another power she has is the ability to trap a person in their dream, i.e., they can't wake up for a certain amount of time. To make this quirk less overpowered, she isn't able to completely change the dream to give herself an advantage, and the opponent still has the majority of the control. But either way, this quirk rules. Not even your dreams are safe now. In 6th is Radiation. For this quirk, I have a pretty good backstory, and sort of went overboard with how she might fit into this series. But first, let me explain the quirk. This girl can release an invisible, toxic radiation from her bones, which spreads in all directions from herself in about a 5-meter radius. The longer someone is exposed to this radiation, the more side effects they get. After about 1 minute, they start to slow down and feel sick. After 2 minutes, they can barely move and are extremely dizzy and hallucinating. After 3 minutes, they will be dead. So on with the backstory. When she was 6 years old, both her parents died unexpectedly and she became an orphan. The day after at school, she broke down in the middle of a class from sadness. She can't remember much apart from waking up in the hospital with the hero 13 being by her bed. 13 explained to her that she had a dangerous quirk and that he would watch over her until she found out what the quirk was and could control it. At the age of 10, she found out what her quirk was, and realised that was what had killed her parents. She had been releasing small amounts of radiation across the years, and they had developed cancer from it. In the school incident, she had released a huge amount due to emotional trauma, and that had almost killed all her classmates. From this, she decided that she had to become a hero, so that she could save others and make up for her past. She then continued to train under 13 until enrolling at UA. For the first 2 seasons, you don't really see much of her, and we don't even find out what her quirk is. She doesn't get much screen time, and is always hanging out with Mina and the other girls. In Season 3, during Deku's fight with the Muscular, Deku's on the verge of losing when she turns up out of the blue. She tells Deku to go back and let her fight. He says okay, but has never seen her quirk or how she fights, so is very curious and nervous at the same time. He watches her fight with Muscular and starts to panic, as it looks like she isn't doing anything. She is barely able to dodge Muscular's attacks, and isn't attacking herself in any way. He then starts to notice Muscular's movements are getting slower and weaker. Soon after, he drops to the floor, and she announces that the fight is over. Both Muscular and Deku are completely shocked, as it seems like she didn't attack once. A few moments later, Muscular vomits and then faints. She then moves closer to Deku, and he asks how she did that. She sighs and tells him about her quirk reluctantly, and why she wants to become a hero. He then uses some sort of talk no jutsu and convinces her that her parents dying wasn't her fault, and that she's great and all. She then finally realises that she's a good person, and that she doesn't need to be afraid of her quirk anymore. Good backstory and good quirk, and one that if you don't know before you fight her, you're probably going to lose.
Just a final note on the design, her eyes go green when she uses this quirk, and she also wears bracelets which help prevent the leak of radiation.
5 is lag. When he activates this quirk, his opponent sees him as if he's moving at 1 frame per second, making him look like he's lagging, which means his movements are extremely hard to track. Combined with his natural speed, it's almost impossible to defend against him. The only way you can beat him is if you're able to expel an attack outwards from yourself in all directions. 4. Position swap. The user can swap positions with anyone she sees as many times as she likes. Now this is overpowered in so many ways. So overpowered that I was thinking about adding some sort of catch. But then I do have some ways to beat it. Its first use is for dodging attacks. Let's say she's in a 2v1 situation. If one of them tries to attack her, she can just dodge it by swapping places with the other person, protecting herself while causing the other guy to get hit. Then, imagine her if she's been chased by the police and running through a crowd. She can just run away so easily by jumping from person to person. The second use is in putting her enemy in a difficult situation. If there was a cliff, she could jump off it, and then swap positions with her opponent to make them fall instead. You would have to fight her whilst making sure she isn't in any position that allows her to do something like this, which of course would be very hard. The third use would be for a quick attack. Back to the 2v1 situation. If the two were standing close to each other, she could just swap positions with one of them and then stab the other before they could even do anything. And if they didn't know the quirk, they would literally have no time to react. Now, the ways in which you can beat this quirk are simple but limited. Fighting in a dark area, or somehow stopping her from seeing you will work, and also limiting your fights to a 1v1 to limit the amount of options to her. All in all, she'd make a very annoying but cool villain, with potentially the fastest speed out of anyone. 3. Written in blood. Now, I'm not completely sure if this would beat the quirk above it, but I have a great character design to it. This quirk, written in blood, allows any word of action that the user writes in blood on his or his opponent's body to happen. This can be anyone's blood. It doesn't necessarily have to be his or the person's he's writing it on. These action words could be, for example, sink, float, shrink, explode, heal or die, etc. This is a picture of him at the end of the entrance exam, which he scored highest on. Because along with his quirk, he has incredible physical fitness and battle tactics. However, he does have one weakness. He can't spell very well. What a hilarious drawback for a character with a quirk like this to have. Think about it. How funny would that be? As well as his lack of spelling though, he doesn't even know many words. He's quite quiet when you speak to him, and he's actually really nice, so the others in the class feel kind of sorry for him. You can see him in the forest training arc with a dictionary and glasses on, trying to learn new words and practice his spelling. Imagine if he could spell how powerful he would be. You could just write die on anyone. Super cool character. Second is health swap. Oh my goodness, this quirk is so overpowered. And I know I use the word overpowered a lot, but this takes it to a whole new level. Basically, she can swap her current physical health with another person. I.e., if she's about to die and her opponent has taken no damage, she can swap their healths over so that she is full fitness and they are on the brink of death instead. Dang. For this reason, she is always confident in battle, and it's confusing to her opponents when they can see she's extremely injured, yet still laughing away. She can win without using this quirk, but has more fun when her opponent is strong, and she can switch the tides in the final moments. She can swap health with someone new every minute, so if she was in a 1v5 situation, for example, or if your battle was in the middle of a crowd, she'd just be able to keep regenerating. The only chance you have is if you fight 1v1, and if both your healths are extremely low, because then there would be no point for her swapping. Plot armor could also help you win, as even on a low health, a protagonist can still win an impossible fight. The second use of this quirk would be for the benefits of others. You could heal a friend in exchange for you taking on their pain or illness. However, as she is a villain, she's not very likely to do this. If she was a very loyal member to Shigaraki in the League of Villains, she may die in his place if he has been defeated, to give him one more chance at defeating the heroes.
And now, for number 1. The one you've all been waiting for. This quirk tops the list because of its sheer strength and killing ability. This quirk is Orbit. This guy would be the main villain in the series, with his main aim being to create a new world where quirks no longer exist, and where all humans are equal. His quirk, Orbit, makes him the sun in the centre of a mini solar system, with the other planets orbiting around him. As the sun, he is bright and boiling to touch, and already possesses various fire powers and other combat abilities. On demand, he can crush one of the planets orbiting him in his hand and use its power. Each planet has a different power depending on their properties. Crushing Pluto creates a massive tsunami. Neptune releases a toxic gas. Uranus grants him extraordinary ice powers. Saturn creates an asteroid shower. Jupiter allows him to give a magnetic force to anything. Mars makes a dust hurricane. Venus increases the atmospheric pressure to pull everybody towards the ground. And finally, Mercury allows him to bend molten hot iron. Note when he uses a planet, it will take 1 day for it to return to his orbit, and also that part of that planet will be destroyed in the real solar system. I'll come to Earth in a second. As I said at the start, he comes into the story near the end as the main villain. All heroes must come together to defeat him, with Deku as their leader. They are able to get through all the first 8 planets, but sustain an extremely high amount of injuries and casualties, including the majority of the heroes and many of Class 1A. Only Midoriya, Bakugo, Uraraka, Ida and Todoroki remain. He says that when he uses Earth next, part of the planet will be destroyed. They form a plan to try and stop him, and they come within 1 centimetre of landing a finishing blow when he is just able to crush it in his hands, and the part of Earth they are on explodes. Only Deku is left standing, and this is to Orbit's utter disbelief. They have a long argument about what's right in the world, and Orbit gets extremely emotional, saying that he has to absolutely get rid of all the quirks and inequality. He says that he will sacrifice himself in order to allow the world to start anew. He says that as a sun, he is the last planet and will blow himself up to create a massive fire blast. Deku thinks about all his friends and the people he cares about, and conjures all his power up, and just as Orbit explodes, he hits him with One for All, and is able to deflect the incredible blast of fire upwards away from the Earth. With this, Orbit has been defeated, and Deku passes out. When he wakes up, his friends are around him, praising him for winning and saving the planet. He is happy to see everyone is alright, and soon they start on restoring the damage.
So cool.
And there you have it, 100 original My Hero Academia quirks. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and write in the comments which was your favourite and why. Depending on how popular this video is, I might do a second version. I have my email in the description, so if you send any ideas with designs, I can make a fan version. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.